Regarding the economy, to what extent would a change in fiscal or other policies, even including a change in oil production or the number of rigs actually online, reduce the cause of inflation and maybe thus mitigate the monetary policy response needed by the Fed to combat inflation?
Interesting question. Yeah. And so I should share sort of our view of the causes of inflation, right? And so last summer, so just a few months after our last meeting, our last conversation, we started to see inflation pick up. And it was actually in summer of 2021 that there was this debate in the economics world about whether all of the price inflation that we were beginning to see, and this is back in the days of 4%, 5% inflation, if those price increases were simply because of a supply chain crunch, that factories making silicon chips had shuttered or had their output reduced as a result. There weren't as many automobiles being manufactured, right? And the lack of supply of those bid up prices for automobiles, right? So it was a question about whether or not that was purely transitory supply chain or whether it was a more persistent monetary issue. And at the time, we were nearly alone. So last summer, we completed a survey for the Wall Street Journal where their 70 forecasting houses were asked to grade the Federal Reserve. And at the time, we were the only forecasting house in that group to score the Fed very poorly. 68 of 70 gave a letter grade of A or B. And that's to say people really believe that they sort of had things in hand, they understood what was driving inflation. And it also reflected a belief that it would largely be transitory. Obviously now even the Fed has abandoned the notion that it's transitory. I believe now they're talking about hoping that by the end of 2022, that the situation might start to correct. We really see this as classic monetary inflation, right? And so it's been said, Milton Friedman famously said, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. The Federal Reserve increased the money supply 30% during the pandemic. And then the fiscal authority, right, distributed, that expansion of the balance sheet was in many cases buying federal debt so to fund fiscal projects. And so some crazy numbers that I heard for California. So if you add up all of the various relief programs of the last 2 years, the per capita spending in California was almost $14,000. Even more remarkably, if you look at a family of four, and if a family of four qualified for every single relief program that was out there, that equated to over $100,000 for a family of four. The average payment, the average benefit for a family of four was over $65,000, right? That's the median income. And that relief was in excess, was actually greater than all of the foregone economic activity that was caused by the shutdowns. And so what that did initially was it increased savings. So the savings rate went from 7% to over 33%.
Wow.
Moody's Analytics estimates that there's $2.6 trillion in excess savings as a result of this. So that's to say, if you just take the savings rate pre-pandemic and you assume we would have continued at that savings rate, the additional savings amount to $2.6 trillion sitting on family bank accounts. And of course, that is driving this dramatic surge that's monetized by the Fed, sitting in household bank accounts, and now driving a dramatic increase in consumption. Goods consumption is up 15% relative to the pre-pandemic. I heard a statistic the other day that e-commerce is up 39%. And of course, every day, the port in San Pedro every month is setting new records for volume, right? And so this is not the case that the supply chain shrank, right? It's actually that there is more movement of goods, more demand than ever before. And of course, that's creating inflation. And so we take a pretty strong view about what the source of that inflation is. And that means that we expect it to resolve less quickly. That again, you have all of that excess savings, you have the Fed's extraordinary balance sheet, the increase in the money supply. And we expect that to still be driving inflation, unfortunately, for many months and perhaps years ahead. And you don't have to believe us. You can actually believe economic actors. The New York Fed actually does a survey, and I was really struck by this. For December 2021, the most recent survey that they released, the 1 year ahead median inflation expectation was 6.7%. So in their survey, people expect 1 year from now, inflation will still be 6.7%. And the median 3-year inflation expectation was 4.9%, right? So that people expect inflation of 5% 3 years from now.
Wow.
And we find that to be pretty credible.